I don't know. It's going to take longer to paint yours than mine. Mm-hmm. Yep. Huh? Fucking holy shit. Come on. I'm so hungry. I just don't fucking have time to make anything. Ow. For the fucking energy. As soon as I make something, I'm too fucking stressed out to actually eat.
Well, I think, so between the U.S. and Egypt, they've worked with Israel to...
You super sick.
Let's bring in retired Major General David Fraser, our CTV military analyst. General, thank you very much for joining us as always. Good to be with you. This attack this morning, or apparent attack on Tel Aviv, a missile launch from Hamas, are you surprised by that? Well, I'm not surprised, but at the same time, it's well planned by Hamas, and they wouldn't have much significance strategically. It just shows from the area that Israel is attacking into Rafah, Hamas still has the ability to reach out and attack Tel Aviv. So it is a political strategic strike more than it is a tactical one, but it also demonstrates Hamas still has the capability, notwithstanding the IDF are right on the doorsteps, to inflict damage onto Tel Aviv. So again, it's just showing a bit of the weakness of what the IDF and what the Prime Minister of Israel is trying to do, that Hamas can still attack them. Now, they've been quiet for 4 months when it comes to any kind of missile attacks. Is there a reason for right now, a specific reason? Well, I think, that's going to be the big question, whether or not that they have enough missiles, and they're just harboring what resources they do have, that the IDF are getting so close that they don't want to lose these missiles, so they might as well just fire them off. I mean, it could be any or all of the above. The fact of the matter remains is that, they fired these. There can be a lot of questions to the IDF and to the Israeli Prime Minister, what are you going to do as a result of this? But for Hamas, it just shows that they are a lethal force. And Tel Aviv, not a surprising target? No, it's not. I mean, if you want to get people's attention, I mean, look at us on a Sunday morning. We're talking about Tel Aviv. We're not just talking about missile attacks, into Israel or anywhere else. We're talking about into the Israeli capital, and that is a capital with the major city. And that is important for the Israelis to deal with, and to show that Hamas has still got a lot of punch left in it. So this is a political statement. Is there any way Israel can retaliate to this, or they'll just continue their operations? Roger, I think they're just going to double down on their operations, and even with Israeli ground commanders, they're probably getting a lot of encouragement and pressure from the politicians to say, finish this off, get it done. So we're going to see a lot more attacks into Rafah. We're probably going to see an acceleration of some of the ground fighting, which is bad news for the Gazans, and it's bad news for that humanitarian aid. How do you get through the fighting to get it to the people who need it the most? How do we interpret Egypt saying yes to them moving the aid to go through the southern Israel port rather than through Rafah? Well, I think it's from the Egyptians' point of view, they can't go through Rafah because it's in Israeli hands. The problem there is what's the word out of the There can be no peace in the Middle East without Palestinians and Israelis having their own states, and that there is a two-state solution. There cannot be a two-state solution without a Palestinian state. And in other words, peace in the Middle East requires a Palestinian state. Ireland's new Prime Minister, Simon Harris, referenced Ireland's own history of recognition of Palestinian state. An historic and important state for Ireland under Palestine.
Yay. Anything. I just want 8 of them. Like,
You control his emotions, wears his heart on his sleeve, but don't get mad. One who gives her all his time, puts his dreams to the side and gets a real man.
Give me 2 more days.
Yeah, she says she wants a real man. But what she wants is not for real, man. The movie that she wanted was a dream and not reality, or something that she got.
Hey, honey,
The man
you
up on a pedestal discards him when she found out he was human. He dropped. He's not perfect, but he tries to live up to her beautiful life.
It's fine. It's fine.
The man he once knew
Get
on
the fuck
the
out of here.
inside died. Yeah, she says she wants a real man. One who opens up the door, holds her hand and still smiles when he feels bad. In control of his emotions, wears his heart on his sleeve, but don't get mad. One who gives him his time, puts his dreams to the side.
No, you just talk to sweat.
One time for the praying on my downfall. 2 times for the homies in the tower. 3 times for the homies on the internet shitting on niggas when they ready to get out. 4 times for the days that were all bad. 5 times for the bitches.
Okay, thank you. Who's freaking out? Ow. Man, boss, continue watching? Man, I love when you guys do that. Love video. Okay. I am so hungry. All this meat. Oi. This is coming. Oh, interesting. Okay, why not? Okay. Oh, do.
Incredibly lucky to be alive at a time when this information has come about.
It should be totally cool. Any question that you've ever had.
Oh, wow. The Army sees know more and more about weather that surrounds this planet. Is a vital part of the expanded research program of atomic. We all talk about the weather.
Oh, no, like,
The Army is doing
with the gap right down the middle. Now this gap is here because they are creating this gap. I'm going to show you exactly what it starts right about here. You start seeing a static buildup. You also saw a significant radar beam right there. There's nothing natural about this beam. It has a constant effect. And as we move forward, you can see the entire area here become all static. Each radar tower from Texas to Oklahoma all the way up to the Dakota is going up at this point in time, creating a force field right in the middle of these two systems. One here and one here. All this little static looking stuff on the radar. That means all of these next red towers are being
Everything I own has a dying, dead, or laggy point where it doesn't function. Like fucking what the fuck is that here? Oh, okay. What if whoever's fucking like scream and cry and go? No? No. Okay. Holy shit, really? Oh, like a mummy on it or some shit. That's fucked up. Never seen that one before. I don't know what the fuck to speak about at this point. Oh, good. Fantastic. Why? This is so fucked.
These two systems, this one here and this
Okay,
one
wait,
here.
go back. Let's see that.
To bring down monsoons during the Vietnam, to wash out the Viet Cong.
In 1961, Congress directed the Bureau of Reclamation to begin a long-range study of cloud seeding with the aim of eventually augmenting the nation's supply of water. The program, called Project Skywater, continues at many sites throughout the United States.
Cloud seeding is booming. They anticipate at least another 200 ground cloud seeding machines to be put in before next season. We've been doing this since the 1940s and 50s. Other countries do it.
This is no coincidence whatsoever. They're doing this on purpose, and they do it often. Right now, I want you to focus on this big gap in between these two systems right now. The one that's coming in from the west, and then the system we've just been dealing with. Take a look at this gap right in the middle of both of them. We had a counterclockwise spin effect going here, but at the same time, we have a clockwise situation going on right here. Watch this gap that is forming, or has been formed, in between system 1 and system 2. This clear line right here. I want you to notice the counterclockwise spin here and then the clockwise momentum here. I'll go back and we'll look at it together. You can see them spinning in different directions with the gap right down the middle. Now this gap is here because they are creating this gap. I'm going to show you exactly when it starts right about here. You start seeing the static buildup. You also saw the significant
What is happening today?
Dakota is going
Oh,
at
the
this point in
fucking
time,
grand.
force field right in the middle of these two systems, one here and one here. All this little staticky looking stuff on the radar, that means all of these next red towers are being triggered at the same time. And now when we go back to this chart, it's going to be a lot easier to see what's going on here. So they want to separate these, this one here and this one here, because if these two were to interact with each other, it would take away from the momentum that this storm is going to build up and then run across Texas in a counterclockwise. After it fixes itself, right now it's in a clockwise momentum, and once this passes out this way, you're going to see this thing begin to spin in a counterclockwise direction. It's going to start pulling up that moisture through Texas and Louisiana. Wait till you see as we go through the day, we're at the 26th now. Here is the 27th, and look how this thing extends out. It's almost got fingers. These are the frequency waves I've been talking about. These are not physical waves in the respect that we see on this chart, 50 to 62 waves. There's nothing physical about this. This is a frequency or a technology coming from the Norwegian island, and sometimes it looks like it's coming from the coast of Antarctica itself. But look at this spread. It actually looks like it has a hand or fingers attached to it. This is the second time we're seeing this type of anomaly, different beams going in different directions. This is the exact thing I've been trying to explain. In my opinion, this is what's heating up the Atlantic Ocean. We have these beams going out in different directions. We've had severe weather events in all over Africa lined up exactly with each time we see the anomaly come out. We also had a very severe situation in Brazil. Look at these. These are straight beams of energy being pulsed in different directions, and now we are seeing the live effects of it. They will remove everything after today. You will not see this after 24 hours, I would say, but take a look at this now. document it and share it as far as you can, because this means something. You're going to have some shit very relevant in Africa, in Syria, South This is very important because we may see some situations take place in the Indian Ocean, Western Australia, and now the entire Western Pacific is also involved in this. We've had some high-level earthquakes in this area as well. Keep an eye out for more of those. But my friends, this is super important. This is not a glitch. It's happened about 8 or 9 times since February, and this cannot be ignored. I don't care what Ventus guy says. They play damage control and acknowledge this as a USO, as some people were saying, which is totally gaslighting my theory about this.
Giving up already, bro?
Yeah, it's way too hard.
Yeah, you're just being a dum-dum about it. Download something piano and pop it on me, king.
Okay?
Yeah.
Stop being creepy. Just tell me what to do.
It's pretty self-explanatory, dollface. Just click the first lesson and the app will take you step by step.
Okay, so listen to what notes I play. I guess that's pretty cool.
Hey, whatever, play a song so my soul can finally leave the piano.
Oh, we're doing like a ghostly possession thing. That makes more sense.
Yeah, I'm free. See you later, doofus. Yeah, see you later, doof.
Because in 2002, shortly after like a lot of military veterans, I raised my right hand and I took an oath to the Constitution to hopefully do something meaningful with my life. 19 years old, unsure what I wanted to do. So I enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. My job in the U.S. Air Force was working in bioenvironmental engineering. So what bioenvironmental engineering is in the Air Force is equivalent to that of the OSHA and the EPA, if you're familiar with that. So we were an embedded liaison to make sure that we were tracking all of the aspects and impacts of the military, meaning what is the military doing and how is it impacting the environment, because we were accountable for that. Being government, we did not get any special treatment. We just couldn't be fined in another federal agency. EPA can't, but not OSHA. So from the health side, it was knowing what you do in the Air Force. What does your job entail that is hazardous to your health? And I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that you were an aircraft painter. You were a mechanic. My job would go out to make sure I knew everything that you did, what you were exposed to, and how to mitigate and engineer out those hazards. Because we needed to, one, it's your legal right to be working in a safe and healthful work environment. So throughout 9 years, I worked as an industrial hygienist and an environmental specialist. There's 2 bases I was at that are called aerolistic centers. What does that mean? It's not like a fighter wing, it's not really fun and amazing. What they did is they took aircraft that around every 10 to 15 years, they were required to be dismantled down to the last screw. So that meant every single industrial process you can think about, checking the metal integrity, making sure everything's good to go, or sometimes overhauling equipment. Part of my job in tracking the health hazards was to look at any time someone wanted to buy a chemical, any type of chemical. It was ordered through a system, and in that system, I had to go in there and say, the country we're in, we're not allowed to use this. We need to substitute it out with something a little less hazardous. while also maintaining the integrity for a technical order, meaning for that process it says you must use, xylene or toluene to do this process. Well, I have to kind of fast forward. I want to say around 2006, I started kind of opening my eyes to how the military wasn't really what I thought it was. And people approached me knowing what I did for a living and said, have you ever heard of CRISPR? Well, I hadn't. And that sparked my interest. So I went online and I looked at sites. I saw a lot of, debunking, a lot of sites that were just kind of calling it a conspiracy theory. And I thought, well, geez, this is what I do for a living. Preventive health, making sure that people are not getting sick, especially in the workplace, and by things that we're doing that can affect, human health and the environment. To summarize, in an attempt to debunk this conspiracy theory as I thought it was, I just debunked it. It literally changed my life. Like I said, this is hard for me because it's not easy standing here and telling my story.
It's so hard.
One day I was going through that computer system, which if you want to look it up, it's called an Air Force Form 3952. It is the approval of hazardous materials. I was finding tons and tons of large quantities of aluminum, barium, strontium in the forms of oxide and sulfate. Are you having any laughing? Are you getting any laughing? If other people do, I can you have a little fun?
We want people to see our country. We want people to understand who we are.
From coast to coast, there's so many different indigenous people, and they really have their own stories to tell.
There's so many different elements that draw you to indigenous tourism. It's a culture that more people need to know.
Now is the time to celebrate our connection to this beautiful vast country.
Can you please just do the thing?
I was able to take a number of flights where we could sample through these condensation trails of these confluent layers that had been laid out earlier in the day. So on the first sampling mission, we started at the Baltimore-Washington International Airport. The University of Maryland has a twin-engine Cessna that is a flying laboratory. It has a sampling nozzle at the front of the plane that collects air samples prior to any contact with the plane or the engines or anything behind. Those samples are then taken through a tube, pass through a filter cassette, and these filters are glass fiber filters that are pretty large, pore-space filters that do effectively capture ground pollution. So PM 2.5, those particle sizes are 2.5 microns, and they've done a really good job of it. But it's not really the proper equipment to completely evaluate the number of particles that might be smaller than that. And we're talking 10 to 100 times smaller than the PM 2.5 particles. But those do capture some of them. And we flew in an air-controlled zone and basically flew big circles trying to get to altitude, but the control towers wouldn't actually allow us to reach the altitude that we needed. They basically want you to pass through that zone. The second flight that we conducted was flown from BWI to Albany International Airport. All right, we're just in pre-flight here. This morning, we observed emissions from several planes, several high altitude planes, flying between 25 and some of 40,000 feet. And the trails that were left behind these planes spread out into a volume layer, and the angle of the sun in the morning allowed for us to observe the polarizing effect of those particles using simple polarizing lenses. We could see these objects. Our intention was to do a point-to-point sampling where we could actually reach altitudes, approaching 20,000 feet. Unfortunately, on our flight from BWI to Albany, the layer that we observed was at 27,000 feet, and I think we made it to about 23,000 feet, perhaps, and so we were below that confluent layer that we observed. We landed, had lunch, they refueled the plane. We have two blanks of control samples. One was taken prior to the flight, one was taken after the flight. So we should have, again, two blank samples, and actually three samples, one on ascent, one at level flight, and then slight ascent from 17,000 to 21,000, and then change the filter and took another sample, a third sample, as we descended. And then on the return mission, though, we noticed that that cloud layer had descended from 25 or 27,000 feet to about 17,000 feet. So we could easily reach through that, and we sampled below the cloud layer, and I'm saying cloud, I mean an induced cloud layer. We sampled through that confluent layer and above it. We're just about ready to go into the clean room facility. We will be looking at the samples by scanning electron microscopy. Scanning electron microscopy will provide information about particle size distribution. We will be able to get some elemental analysis. What really this technique is for is to prioritize our samples for downstream, more advanced imaging, more high resolution imaging, especially by transmission electron microscopy. Put on a fresh pair of gloves. We're going to start with sample number 8. This is the blank that was collected on the return flight. No flow through this filter, so this filter should be free of any particulates. I'm going to use these scissors and forceps that have been cleansed with isopropanol and then acetone, wipe free with these dust-free cloths. These are the series of samples that we're interested in. These are samples number 9, 10, and 11. These were taken on the return flight where the plane passed through an induced cloud layer. Number 10, I believe, is the one that was passed through the cloud layer at around somewhere between 17 and 19,000. I will take time to explain the difference between each sample.
Oh, wait! Binoculars!
Comparing sample number 9, another sample. Opening it to ensure that the surface that has received the particulates is facing upward. Number 9 is completed. Now processing sample number 10. One additional sample, this blank sample was taken after the plane landed, and 3 of the samples containing actual airflow particulates have been collected. So we have one prior to emission and one to conclusion. Prior to imaging, these samples are coated with a thin layer of platinum. The platinum helps to take the excess charge or electrons and drain them off to the stuff. And now we'll do the samples where we pass through the cloud.
It's like Ronnie, is that what happens when you watch it? Oh gosh,
A few little bright particles. This particle here is probably the one that we'll do the most analysis on.
So the general image that we're seeing now are the glass fibers from the glass fiber filter itself, and the bright particles or bright areas that we see are areas operating in the so-called backscatter mode of this microscope, collects electrons that are backscattered, especially from metal center compounds. But you can clearly see the lighter or darker contrasted areas there, suggesting that it's an aggregate.
Some of the smaller particles in here we're looking at on the order of about 450 nanometers long. But there's also smaller particles in there too. So backscattered electrons, typically the higher the atomic number, the brighter the signal. That being said, what we will do is look for the bright spots and then analyze those. The glass itself does seem to have sodium in it. Looks like aluminum, sodium, silicon, calcium, potassium. So the reason that caught my eye is because it's darker than everything else. It's got lots of small particles in it.
Yep. This gives us a lot of information. Again, it identifies which filters have qualitatively more materials. Just, basically we see more material on it. It also gives us information about size of particles and potential for aggregates that we might be dealing with in the samples.
Simply Piano teaches you how to read notes, and you can't imagine how many times it's come in handy.
Traveler, if it is the treasure you seek, you must first play the ancient tune.
You're the worst.
Barium sulfide again. So barium sulfide is interesting. What he's doing now is just getting a high resolution image of it to see if this is indeed a single particle or if there's any evidence that there's an aggregate of smaller particles.
So really the big standout in this one seems to be iron. In this field we have one there, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
And I did analysis on all of them. They all seem to be pretty similar in composition.
Yeah.
So this is definitely made up of much smaller particles.
Yeah.
So this may be a clump of what.
Yeah.
We just analyzed 3 different areas. This particle seems to be high in aluminum. It's a large flake though. And this has some silver too.
Yeah, in terms of now the aluminum signatures that we're getting from the glass fibers themselves,
This is much bigger.
much bigger.
So look at that.
Yeah.
So it's easily 3x the silicon.
Yep.
And I think the silicon and aluminum are pretty similar in the glass. So here, if you look at just the glass fiber, silicon is significantly taller than aluminum. So that particle there is mostly aluminum.
Yeah.
So measuring this one right here, this is below 70 nanometers.
Right. Good. In the precipitation samples that we've seen in the past, the aluminum oxide particles that we've been seeing are of the order of 40 to 60 nanometers. So that's consistent with the size that we've seen from precipitation events. Again, these samples were collected directly from the air. There's not a lot of approaches or instrumentation that you can use to observe these nanomaterials. I mean, again, these are the sizes of, and so really the only equipment or instrumentation that is appropriate for identifying these materials is high resolution transmission electron microscopy. This allows us not only to determine the size of the particles, we can also determine the composition using a technique called elemental dispersive spectroscopy. It's done within this large microscope. So it will give us information about the morphology of the particles, the composition of the particles, and we can actually see the crystalline spacing, so the spaces of the crystals themselves. So we are talking high resolution microscopic techniques that are really the only way to be able to observe these directly. Morphology is important because the productions of these materials are really of a constrained size range, and we've seen this already in samples that we've analyzed from other sources. American Element produces lots of these nanomaterials, and you can actually purchase them online. The size distributions of these engineered particles are quite homogeneous.
Yeah. It's like there's aluminum. Now, what I've done is tell it to calibrate through the aluminum peak. So now what it's doing is going through each of its process times and each of its gain values and calibrating. I can tell you this much. What I'm seeing right now is far superior to the last time I ran an illustration. So you see you got 2 calciums, right? Yeah. All right. K alpha, K beta. Right? This variant peak is probably an L and an M. Here's your major variant.
Yeah, and then you have the other.
Correct. Variant is a triple population. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The significance of the results is that, to my knowledge, this is the first evidence of nanomaterials collected directly from the emissions of aircraft. This is the first time that this has been reported or acknowledged.
You would need talent.
So we conducted the analyses of these nanomaterials, and conclusively confirmed that there
No,
were
it's okay.
aluminum oxide, barium
explain later.
sulfate nanoparticles in the samples that we took on the East Coast on that second flight. To my mind, that would be sufficient, but I'm also quite interested in what's going on the West Coast. Are these similar types of results can be collected in various regions? I was really thankful to be part of a third sampling mission. We flew from near San Diego up to the Bay Area and back on one of these days where, again, there was clear evidence of patterned skies being induced by the emissions of aircraft. In this sampling mission, there was a couple of different things. One is that we used a Learjet, which is a pressurized cabin for one thing. We can get to higher altitudes much quicker. And we used instrumentation that was appropriate for smaller particulates. We had instruments to monitor the air quality in real time. We had 2 particle meters on board, one that measured PM 2.5, so that would be relatively large particles that we're normally concerned about. These respirable particles that get into our lungs. But we also had on board a particle meter that went down to 20 nanometers. So that meter, combined with the larger particle meter, gave us a full assessment of materials ranging from 20 nanometers up to 2.5 microns. Our filters that we use were 0.1 micron, so that's 100 nanometer pore size. That would capture many more of the nanomaterials that were being released. What we're breathing in pressurized cabins is actually air from the outside. It's being taken in front of the engines. Some of the airstream goes into the engine to feed the combustion process, and then bleed air then off of that is taken directly from the outside, pressurized, and then is used to pressurize the cabin. And we could sample it right from the vents. So we had a sampling wand that we could hold up to the vent, and the sampling wand was sampling for the ultrafine particles. We sampled through one of these confluent layers, and as we passed through that layer, the larger particle meter basically read just ambient air within the cabin. With regard to the nanoparticle meter, there was clear evidence that there were smaller particles at significant numbers present within that layer. And that is significant. I mean, this is not only just the number of particles that we observed, but also that they were confined to that smaller size range. Above the layer, again, the air quality was quite good.
Alrighty, well that was like super educational, and we're gonna probably go watch that again later. Diesel and God, there's fucking nothing on. Who is real? Okay, maybe. This sounds good.
In July of 2000,
historians
and political scientists sat down to interview Bob Gates for the George Herbert Walker Bush Oral History Project. Gates was CIA director during Bush's tenure.
Okay.
These were eventful years, and so the men spoke of the Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, Somalia, German reunification, a fascinating insider perspective into the first Bush White House. Amid the interview, historian H. William Brands asks the old spy chief a question many were doubtless curious to know. Was there anybody that George Bush actively disliked? Shamir. Gates, of course, is referring to Yitzhak Shamir, the Israeli prime minister at the time.
Oh yeah.
But I will say this.
Is that bald guy?
Every president I worked for, at some point in his presidency, would get so pissed off at the Israelis that he couldn't speak. It didn't matter whether it was Jimmy Carter or Jerry Ford or Ronald Reagan or George Bush. Something would happen, and they would just absolutely go screw themselves right into the ceiling. They were so angry, and they'd sort of rant and rave around the Oval Office. I think it was their frustration about knowing that there was so little they could do about it because of domestic politics and everything else that was so frustrating to them. But he did not, I think, care very much for Shamir. I'm trying to think about others, but I can't think of any others.
Poor fucking.
No doubt 2 decades before Bush was even sworn in as president, Lyndon Baines Johnson was feeling just as angry and ineffectual.
What does that mean? Oh my goodness, I am not right now. Are you getting any loving? If other people do, I can. Really?
It was the morning of June 8th,
that was like top 2 at this point, I think.
Navy Ensign John Dietrich Scott turned 24 years old. His birthday was business as usual. His crew was stationed in the Mediterranean after having traveled all the way from West Africa. It was an early morning. Just before 4 a.m., he'd get to work. Deck watch. At about the exact same time, a Nord Atlas took to the sky to begin an air reconnaissance patrol. The plane, belonging to the Israeli Air Force, was patrolling along the Mediterranean coast to detect ships beyond radar range. There was only one. It was Navy Ensign Scott's ship. On the bridge, Scott spotted the plane. He grabbed his binoculars to get a better view.
Oh, fuck.
A flying boxcar
cut the
with a double
binoculars.
fuselage
Look at
and
the
twin
plane.
engines. Just 15 minutes before, Scott had watched the ship's
When you say
American
ADT.
flag being pulled by the wind. Up in the cockpit of the Nord Atlas, an Israeli naval officer scanned below, serving as an aerial observer. At 5:45, the plane began reporting that the ship was a destroyer. Less than 20 minutes later, though, according to an official Israeli history, the plane reported that it was, in fact, a U.S. Navy supply ship. The observer had even spotted the ship's hull markings, GTR-5, and the plane's crew radioed the information to ground control.
Fucking weird, man.
Upon landing, the observer was debriefed by a Lieutenant Commander Kinshasa of Air Command.
What?
After which, according to an official Israeli inquiry, the identification of the ship was determined to be the U.S. Navy ship Liberty.
This is not news.
Hi, my name is GDF, and you could probably tell by the direction that this video is going in that I'm not very advertiser friendly. For that reason, I rely completely on my patrons, subscribers, and donations.
Dude. Yeah,
Hours before the attack, Israel knew not only that an American ship sailed nearby, but that it was the spy ship Liberty. Aboard the USS Liberty was a signals intelligence and cryptology command called the Naval Security Group, an organization which reported to the National Security Agency, the NSA. Outfitted with 45 towering antennas and a satellite dish on the ship's stern which bounced messages off the moon to Washington, the ship's true mission was a poorly kept secret.
Ugliest ship in the Navy, and the most unusual, and therefore the easiest of all ships to recognize.
The ship's captain, William McGonigal, would later testify that the configuration of the ship with unusual mast antennae arrangements had resulted in some surveillance from the Southwest African countries during its first 2 deployments. Its usual stomping grounds. African art and masks decorated the ship's walls. Summer 1967 was supposed to entail steaming off to Angola, Liberia, and Gabon. From the port of Abidjan, however, the ship received new marching orders. Late spring saw things heat up rapidly in the Middle East. Egypt and Israel appeared ever closer to war. The ship was now to sail towards Spain, and finally, off of the Sinai Peninsula. It was here that the Liberty was to listen in on communications flying between the warring parties of the ensuing 6-day war. Each day, beginning with Israel's preemptive attack on Egypt, the Liberty was sending a steady stream of updates back to Washington about Israel's capturing the Sinai and the West Bank, including the old city of Jerusalem, in just the first 3 days. The ship was very much not a battleship, and as we shall see, almost completely defenseless. The Liberty carried no cannons and was armed with 4 Browning 50 caliber machine guns. The ship's 4-page gunnery doctrine declared the mounted gun's primary function was to repel boarders, not shoot down fighters. The ship's infirmary was, in turn, not outfitted for war zones. Out of a crew of almost 300, the main ward could accommodate just 4 patients. On a previous cruise, a sailor had to be evacuated to a hospital in Senegal for appendicitis. The examination room, with its lone surgical table, carried sutures and local anesthetic. However, the sailors did not have much reason to believe they'd be targeted for attack by anyone. Its flag flying on its mast, its freshly painted hull markings, its configuration, size, and speed, coupled with the clear weather and lack of surrounding ships, made an attack all the likely. After all, no nation had ever attacked a spy ship, so the worries were not overt, particularly because the Liberty sailed in international waters.
That's also not fun.
Navy Ensign Scott still had eyes on the plane, and even shot 4 photos with a 35mm camera. The plane circled around several times, then took off in a true direction toward Tel Aviv. A single jet aircraft circled the ship at 8:50. 2 more jets circled 3 times at 10:30. 11 a.m. another plane circled. More planes came at 11:30, 11:45, 12:20, and 12:45.
What's happening right now?
The weather log on the Liberty showed clear skies, calm seas, and excellent visibility north of the Sinai on June 8th, 1967.
Okay,
Fall
how did we get here?
preceded a vicious storm. Just before 2 p.m., Captain McGonigal peered through binoculars from the starboard wing. He spotted a fighter jet. Ensign Patrick O'Malley studied the radar. On the screen were 3 blips. We've got 3 unidentified vessels, steady bearing, decreasing range, coming right at us.
Mr. Captain, I've never seen anything approach the ship this fast.
McGonigal turned to Lieutenant Junior Grade Lloyd Painter. I think they're going to attack. French-made Mirage jets straight for the Liberty. The bridge was first. Rockets and 30mm cannon rounds blew the vessel. Shrapnel flew everywhere.
And I could see orange flashes dancing down the deck. Men in the forward gun mounts, both forward gun mounts were literally blown into the air, end over end.
The Liberty never stood a chance. From just the first burst of bombs and bullets, the ship's machine guns were destroyed. Antennae were smashed. Basketball-sized craters littered the deck and bridge. McGonigal alerted the crew to increase speed to maximum power, but the jets had blown out one of the ship's 2 boilers. The Liberty's max speed would be just about 13 miles per hour. Jets tag-teamed the ship and attacked it in a crisscross formation.
Have you heard of semaglutides? Ozempic, Mounjaro?
This could be dangerous.
Yes!
Let's do it.
I thought it was
South Park, the end of obesity. New exclusive event. Now streaming. Exclusively on Paramount Plus.
The fighters first strafed the Liberty from bow to
See, he
stern.
didn't say that at first when South Park came back out. I had to go through a fucking streaming thing to try to find it. Fortunately, I fucking stumbled on Crave.
The Liberty's heart. The attacks came in waves, about every minute.
Stupid.
Radioing for help proved increasingly impossible as the jets targeted each of the ship's 45 antennae.
Well, you're gonna have to call. We can't
6
find
minutes
your
into the
channel.
attack, the radioman switched transmitters hoping
fries
to
there,
get a message
just
out,
fucking coming.
but the receiver blared feedback noise.
Fucking
Thinking this was just a malfunction, the men were horrified to find the same noise on every frequency, leading the radiomen to conclude that the attackers had jammed the Liberty's communications. Since only between the attacks could the operators receive signals. The Mirage fighters were just the beginning. The second phase of the attack saw the fighters replaced by Mystère bombers armed with napalm. Burning at 3,000 degrees, the explosion sent smoke barreling through the bridge. Bits of flaming jelly charred walls and blistered paint. Fuel barrels caught fire and sent more smoke in the air. After unloading their payloads, the bombers too vanished. There was now another calm in the skies, though not aboard the Liberty, whose deck was strewn with dead and dying. But still, the worst was yet to come, as those 3 blips on the radar screen still hadn't arrived yet.
The torpedo boats that happened to have been the 3 blips that I had seen on the radar scope had reached us and were now
happy that I'm not working at the airport.
McGonigal again pulled up his binoculars and saw some 50 miles off the starboard side.
I will really work on Christmas.
Torpedo
I
boats
would
coming
fucking rather
straight toward him.
work Christmas and
The
New
skipper
Year's than
ordered new
fucking
men
Grand
to
Prix.
replace the dead ones at the 50 cals,
no.
and a new American flag raised to replace the one knocked down by the jets. They grabbed the largest one they had, 7 by 13 feet, and pulled it up the mast at 2:26 p.m. Up until now, the ship's crew had no idea who was even attacking them.
Here, but
Egyptians? Soviets?
I saw what it
well, not anymore, because nobody fucking does anything. No happiness, no joy.
No doubt McGonigal was stunned to find
Twinkler Village, you start walking around this ice cream and it's just silent. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? It's fucking
with
freaky.
the Star of David in the center.
It's fucking weird.
The boats then opened fire.
Okay.
Along with 50 cals of their own, the ships also possessed 20 and 40 millimeter cannons. These weapons, of course, were designed to create a distraction, as their gunners manually aimed torpedoes at the Liberty. Nearly 300 sailors now prepared for the unthinkable.
not since the waning days of World War II.